I'm Brian. This is the Other 51, joined as always by my good friend, APSE award-winning feature writer, the man behind Go Long TD, the football Substack you need to be subscribing to. And perfectly timed as the football season's just around the corner. Tyler Dunne, welcome back, my man.
Brian, it is an honor to be sitting here with you. I have so much nostalgia and flashbacks going through my mind because I was just talking to Chuck Pollock a couple weeks ago. Now I'm talking to you. It's like we're back in Olean, New York, baby, putting out that Times Herald.
Back on Norton Drive with the index cards, trying to track down that last Friendship Scio Allegheny County soccer game.
Yes.
That podcast you did with Chuck, I'll throw a link in the show notes. That was epic. And I've talked to Chuck too on this, and it's just great because you just tee him up and let him go. I mean, he's just got stories forever.
Completely. I mean, that was the whole goal of that one. Just hey, Chuck, what was it like covering the Buffalo Bills in the 1970s and 80s? And man, his stories, it just brings you back. It's like you slip into the time machine and you go to a day when, I mean, covering sports now is awesome for many different reasons. But I do wish I lived in that time to just be on that team flight and witness what he witnessed, firsthand, fights going down, hearing what you're going to hear at the bar. It was different. Like there isn't that instant concern about how something will be digested on Twitter and disseminated to millions of people. I think that is in a lot, not everybody, a lot of coaches, a lot of players, a lot of people we cover today, like that's in their brain. And it just kind of creates this, propaganda, maybe a little strong, but things are a little poll tested for a lot of guys, right? Like, how is this going to be consumed and how does it affect my brand? Which that wasn't the case back then.
Well, yeah. And I mean, part of it is just the money involved now, right? Like back in the 70s, guys were making, 5 figures, probably 6 figures at such, but, they weren't making the generational money, which players can now. Like a lot of the players you read about, a couple $1 million, you get to that. I think players always talk about that second contract, right? Like you get your first one and it's a rookie deal. But if you can get to that second contract and not even just a quarterback, just, a free agent signing, or you get to that second deal. I mean, for a lot of players it's all life-changing money, but that's generational changing money for a lot of these guys.
And then you think about where they come from too. Mm-hmm. And it's, gosh, I've never, and thankfully, I don't think I've ever become desensitized to the childhood story for a lot of these NFL players. I mean, Damar Hamlin, McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, more than half of the people that he grew up with dead, right? Mm-hmm. Losing his dad to prison for his formidable years as a youth and just how that affected him. And this is before he nearly dies on a football field. We're just sitting at Elmo's eating wings, and he's like, man, I want to give hope to people in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. It's like, well, holy shit, you kind of did that for the entire world, right? With the Buffalo Bills on, God, that night in Cincinnati. So, I mean, there's a lot of Damar Hamlins. There's a lot of players from neighborhoods just like that. And you think about what this skill that they have can do for everybody in their family. I think we might have even did a podcast. We probably talked about it then. I mean, that's kind of how I reconciled covering pro football. And, mm-hmm. You know me, Brian, I'm always celebrating the violence. So when that goes down, it's like, man, how do we look at football? But I think that's what I always come back to is what it can do for all of these players, but not just the players, their families, their friends. I mean, it's life-changing money, to your point, and how you can affect communities for true good.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to get into, because we're going to talk about your APSE winning story on Zay Jones in a little bit. But one thing I want to get to before that is this is the first time, not the first time we've talked. We talk all the time, but the first time we've talked on the podcast since your big blockbuster Sean McDermott series ran last November. My wife and I we're giving you full credit as the Bills kind of responded late in the year. We're like, Tyler better get a playoff share after they kind of bounced back and started playing well after that. But I wanted to, because the football season's starting up now. It's been several months since that. And I know that you and Sean and you and the Bills have talked more, I think, than you ever have since in your histories go along. So kind of walk us through, I think starting at the combine, it was kind of the reaction of what's kind of been the long-term fallout, for lack of a better word, I guess, of that piece.
Right. I could even go to the day after the 3-part series came out, 21,000 words and all of these sources, players, coaches, scouts, people around the NFL. So that series is published, I believe, on a Thursday. The Bills and Sean McDermott have their press conference, and to his credit, to their credit, I mean, they didn't deny anything
Mm-hmm.
publicly, privately, through other media members. I mean, they owned it to the extent that they could own it. You know, the 9/11 anecdote obviously being what I did up on Saturday Night Live and everywhere you looked, and I had a feeling that would drop jaws because it dropped my jaw. You know, when I heard that, it's like, what? Like are we talking about the flight that, you know, could have hit the Pentagon and maybe like the heroism of the passengers on that flight? No. So, I mean, we don't need to rehash everything. I mean, obviously, Sean McDermott's point wasn't pro terrorism. It was illustrating that maybe he is a coach who tends to overthink, overanalyze, a little too robotic in a situation like that, and trying to motivate and inspire his team in 2019. So, anyways, to answer your question, I got a call from the Bills and Sean McDermott the day after. It was cordial. It was fine. I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. And Sean just said that he would like to get together after the season sometime over a cup of coffee and get to know each other. I said that would be a great idea. Let's do it. I've been wanting to sit down and talk for quite some time. And Go Long is an independent website. I covered the NFL at Bleacher Report, covered the Packers at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the Bills at the Buffalo News. But in terms of like credentialing, it's very team to team, but most all teams, they recognize that the sports media climate has changed and I am credentialed, and the Bills just chose up to that point not to do that, not to let Go Long in the building, and that's their prerogative. But like I told them at the time, years back, I know we're jumping all over the place here. I just said that I'm still going to write about the Bills, right? I live here in Western New York. My duty is not to the Bills; it's to readers, to subscribers, to fans, to cover a fascinating team at a fascinating time. That's why I did the Isaiah McKenzie show. I still met up with players on my own, over chicken wings and doing what I can to cover the team in a unique way, and they understood. So organically along the way, you're going to hear a lot about the head coach, with where this team has gone year to year to year, wasting real opportunities at a Super Bowl when you have Josh Allen, the best player this side of Patrick Mahomes. So that conversation happens and the season ends, and I hear from the Bills, Sean wants to get together at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. And it was just at the convention center, and we talked for an hour and a half. It was a long conversation, and I don't want to get too detailed. It was a private chat, but I'm sure Sean doesn't mind me, sharing the cliff notes here. But I just think it says a lot about the head coach and a lot about the Buffalo Bills communications department to kind of broker this meeting where we've never gotten to know each other. I don't think he really knew who I was and how I covered the NFL. And I'm sure there's a lot I didn't know about Sean. We talked about our families. You'll appreciate this, Brian. I think the first topic of conversation was, he just asked me where I live, and I mentioned Boston, New York, here in the Colden area for now, but moving back to Ellicottville soon. And he said, "Oh yeah, I've been down to North Collins. There's a place we kind of go there to get some stuff." I'm like, "Oh, see this scar on my head? I caught an elbow and almost like bled out on the basketball court." That's a little exaggerating, but I did bleed all over the basketball court when we played North Collins. They were our rival in those Ellicottville days. Got it stitched up, came back in the game. So, shared some old high school war stories, which I think he enjoyed, and it was good. We barely even talked about the nitty gritty detail of the series. Like I said, they owned up the part that he was kind of sharing and talking about, and he even said, he's not a perfect man. He's made mistakes, and I'm open to seeing if a coach, like any human being, can evolve. And at least at the end of last season, as a coach, he seemed to evolve. They were aggressive and going for it on fourth down and letting Josh be Josh, as we like to say in our text messages during games, right? So we'll see where this goes, but that's a long-winded answer to say I think it was impressive in terms of the purpose of this podcast, right? Talking about sports journalism and relationship building, and for the team to reopen the doors. I'm credentialed. I was at the draft. at One Bills Drive, mini camp, training camp, sat down with Brandon Beane. I'm going to continue to cover the team through that independent lens. We'll see how this season goes. But it is great to be back in the building and just covering this team as much as it possibly can to go along.
Just curious, when you got the call the next day from the Bills, or even when you're going to the coffee shop at the combine to talk to Sean, what's going through your mind? Are you like, oh man, is this going to get ugly? Is this going to be, are they going to like, how do you kind of steel yourself and prepare yourself for that, what the conversation could end up being?
Right, because you cover the NFL long enough and you're going to have every type of conversation. Because you're probably, I mean, just in general, you're probably not doing your job covering a team or the league if you're not pissing somebody off at some point. I remember the first year I covered the Packers in 2011. It was a preseason game. And I talked to the Packers DBs about just, this is on the heels of their Super Bowl win and Charles Woodson and a lot of turnovers. The year before that, they were number one defense in the NFL. And a lot of DBs just said, in this defense, we can take chances and jump routes and do this kind of stuff. So I didn't remember how I wrote it. Just a preseason game in Indianapolis, but the DB's coach, Joe Witt Jr., was not a fan of that story. And he wanted to see me right in his office the next day. And I said, yeah, I'll see you at practice. The following day we can chat after that. And right after practice, he stormed right over to me, had the article in his hand, had different parts highlighted. When did I tell you this? When did I tell you that guys can jump routes? And I said, well, I've talked to your players, and they describe this defense as one in which they have that freedom. And it went back and forth, and it was minor compared to a lot of the drag out fights you hear about with some reporters. But that being my first year covering an NFL team, it was like, okay. It was unbelievably constructive. That point forward, man, did I have so many great conversations with Joe Witt, learning about football and telling the story of the Packers. But just one example, I think that happens a lot. So I didn't know what to expect. I mean, is it going to be scorched earth? I mean, those who read the McDermott Problem series, see specific examples of how he has interacted with assistant coaches and players, and this could have gone any direction. But he was unbelievably calm. I genuinely mean that. At no point did Sean just shift into wrestler mode and, want to pin me on the mat or anything like that. It was an adult conversation after a series that had a lot of people talking, and there were a lot of emotions all over the place. Side note, Chris Brown, the play-by-play man, him and Steve Tasker, they had some choice words on air when this came out and took some shots. And then when I wrote a column a few days later, kind of reflecting back on the madness, I took a few shots, and then we just saw each other at training camp, and we had a great conversation. Chris approached me and initiated it. I gave him so much credit. And the way I put it to him was like, you know what, Chris, there were a lot of emotions all over the place, those 72 hours. So I think I came out of the conversation with Sean McDermott, similar to the one with Chris there. Everybody, it gives you a little hope in humanity, right? Like we can have differences, right? Those emotions can be all over the place, but we can still sit down and be grown men and chat about this. So I thought it was great. I'll say this: that's not the case with every team. It's not. I wrote a story about the Green Bay Packers at Bleacher Report, 6 years ago at this point. 2019.
Is this the big McCarthy Rogers one?
McCarthy Rogers, the split, right? And I'm still writing about the Packers. I'm still meeting with players and covering the team. And Jordan Love, I probably have kind of beat that one to the bush, huh? Jordan Love, he is going to be an all-time great, though, Brian. You watch it. This guy's a stud. But I don't know. You hear things like, oh, the Packers are still mad at you about that story. I mean, they don't credential go long, believe it or not.
Really?
For as much. Yeah. So is that a reason why? I don't know. I mean, it'd be great to get them in an honest moment. But yeah, I think there are some maybe grudges held by people with teams. And the Bills had every reason to with me, and they didn't. So you got to give them credit. Now, that's not going to stop me. Hey, if shit hits the fan this year, I'm going to write about it. I'm going to cover it with a clear conscience and a clear mind, because I think that's what the fans deserve. Somebody told me yesterday, Brian,
Hmm.
$50 parking for a preseason game. And this is the case for every team.
$50 parking? Jesus.
Yeah, so my compass with covered NFL, it's like, okay, the fans are the ones paying those prices for parking, for a game ticket, an $18 beer, let alone your sanity. I mean, you devote your emotions and your day-to-day mood to a football team. I think those fans deserve the truth. They don't need to be pandered to. They don't need to be misled. There's going to be those poll tested press conferences that are carefully crafted to push the message in a certain direction with any team. And so with go along, I want to try to cut through that and deliver like real raw coverage of the team. So we'll see where this season goes, but I promise to still, follow that compass because that's what they deserve. I mean, and I'm sorry, you got to ask me questions. I'm just
That's
rambling on
fine.
and on.
That's fine. No, this
But
is
like one of the criticisms with this series was like the timing, right?
right.
Why now? Why would you do that to the team now? Well, first of all, I don't work for the Bills. Second of all, the series was done.
Mhm.
I felt it had reached a point where I could publish it. But they're 6-6, and everybody's wondering what the hell happened to this team.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Yeah.
you've got Josh Allen. What's going on? And the cowardly thing to do is to hold on to this all and just wait for people to be fired. And I've done those stories, right? Everybody's done them. Like people are fired, then everybody's willing to talk, and then the story comes out. But a lot of people are willing to talk right now in the moment
Mm-hmm.
about this situation and this team and this coach. So I think the fans have the right to learn more about their team so they can make those educated decisions in their day-to-day lives when it comes to said football team.
Right. All right, so we could talk Sean and Bills all day. I won't bore our non-Bills audience with that, but thank you for being my sanity check during Bills games too, because I don't social media during Bills games. I just text Tyler, and thank God he doesn't respond because it is all those emotions coming out at once. But I do want to spend some time talking about, first of all, congratulations on the APSE award. So if you're not in sports media, that's one of the biggest prizes awards that we get in our field is the Associated Press Sports Editor writing contest. But Ty took first place for his feature on Zay Jones. So congratulations, man. That is very, very cool.
No, thank you so much, Brian. Man, I appreciate that. It was a pleasant surprise, right? I mean, you don't do it for awards, and you don't sit down and write and think, oh, want to do this for awards. You just want to tell compelling stories, but it takes somebody like Zay Jones to reopen those scars.
Yeah.
And man, he did.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about that. So Zay Jones, he was a second round draft pick for the Bills, right? If I remember correctly, second round draft pick for the Bills, got traded to Oakland, had a high profile TMZ stuff just to provide background so we can get into the reporting. Had an incident that went kind of viral on TMZ, and then kind of rebuilt his career. How did you? Let's start at the beginning. How did you come to sit down with Zay? How did you know that this was a story that you were even going to start looking at?
I think there are certain moments in pro sports where you just remember exactly where you were when it happened. And I just remember being in the basement, probably hanging out with Ed. He's a puppy, right? We got the pee pads out, just hoping he doesn't piss on the carpet. And Ed, it's the pee pads are right there, and you got to go outside. We go outside. So I think I was probably in that stage with Ed, and it comes across social media, however we get our news, right? Zay Jones, Buffalo Bills wide receiver, running around naked in an LA condo, whatever it was, 50 floors up, saying he's going to fight for Jesus. And it's like, whoa, what? TMZ had the footage, and it was, there were people who were laughing about it and mocking it. My reaction was like, holy hell, this is horrifying. How did he get to this point? Everything you heard about Zay Jones, the human being, was just glowing. Somebody that you'd want to date your daughter, and that it didn't. It just ran in contrast to everything we've read, everything we've learned about Zay Jones to that point. And then, he had his obligatory scrum after just I'm gonna learn from this. Da, 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 da. He never really explained what led to that point. And then living in Buffalo, seeing what happened with his career, it just deteriorated. he's shipped off to the Raiders. He gets to Jacksonville, and then just kind of following it from afar, it seemed like he got his career back on track. And a lot of these stories, I think it takes a relationship with the player, or maybe somebody close to the player, and you get together over dinner. People are happy when they're eating. That's how I like to do a lot of these stories. But in this case, I just reached out to the Jaguars, and they talked to Zay, and they explained who this bald, bearded person from Western New York was. And when you sit down with him, it's going to be a little longer. It's not 10, 15 minutes. Could be an hour. And so once they kind of get in that mental space, I'm sure he's thinking, all right, we're going to get into some deep stuff here. So I flew to Jacksonville. We sat down, and it's not like you just come out of the gate asking about the night when, he nearly threw himself out of a window, which is crazy. We see the video, but I think what's crazier than the video, Brian, is the picture of the window with the hole in the middle of it that's really big that he was sticking his body out of, and his brother had to pull. His brother saved his life. So not going to immediately just talk about that right away. We got into his childhood, his upbringing. His dad, who's a linebacker for the Cowboys, his life story is nuts. And my buddy Matt Fairburn, he did an excellent story on Zay Jones himself, kind of detailing that as well. But kind of organically through the course of the conversation, we get to that moment, and I think that was the key in addressing all of that. It's like, it's a part of a larger Zay Jones story, but you've got to have a conversation. It can't be like this interrogation or even an interview where you're reading a list of questions. It's like, just look him in the eye, see where it goes, organically get there, and we did.
I think one of the things why this detail stood out to me, but that you guys basically were neighbors when he was at the Bills and you were living in Orchard Park,
Yeah.
right?
Which, yeah, that's what was crazy when he was down and out and depressed. He had the big drop against Carolina, and that was really what started it all. I think it was like 10-9, and Tyrod threw it deep to him. A little tricky the way he turned his body around, but it hit his hands and he dropped it. And that's when everything started to kind of feel like an avalanche coming down on him. And we lived right by each other at the Hammocks apartment complex in Orchard Park. Never knew it, right? I was like, I kind of found that out after the fact when we were just BSing. And I said, yeah, I never knew you lived right there. And he said, yeah, you wouldn't, because I didn't leave. Like, I was depressed. Like, I just stayed in my room and cried and called his parents and was like, what in the hell is going on? So yeah, it is kind of wild. These players are amongst us here in Western New York, like they were out in Green Bay.
So you're interviewing him, and as you're doing the interview and you're kind of winding to the conversation is kind of getting to that moment, and you detail this in the story. You kind of he kind of dances around it. He kind of dances around it. So, when you're doing a story like this, again, it's not an interrogation. It's not an investigative piece. You're telling this guy's story. How do you what are your kind of tools, techniques, tips to steer him to get him to talk about that? Because honestly, Zay Jones you're not going to do a Zay Jones story if he doesn't talk about that night. Like, that night is so thing. If he brushes it off and never talks about it, I guess that's a question too. If he hadn't, do you do the story? How's the story different if he doesn't talk about it? And then how do you kind of get him to talk about that night as much as you can?
Yeah, I think number one, it's not just rushing into it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. I think there's an unspoken understanding here. Like, this is a major part of your life story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could have died. You probably should have died. And what were you on? Like, what leads you to that place? So you both kind of know that elephant's in the room, and I think it takes an individual that's willing to go there. I mean, he easily could have just prefaced the whole interview, the whole conversation by saying, like, yeah, I'll meet with Tyler, but we're not talking about that. And then it's kind of like, then you kind of take it to another level. Like, well, Zay, like, this is a big part of anybody's life story. But it never went that direction. Like, it was, yeah, come on down, let's talk. But I don't think you want to just rush into it. You don't want to just speed into something that could be a little uncomfortable. And it's just body language. And I don't know, like I guess I could sit here and act like it's this scientific, experiment where you're like you're a therapist kind of pulling something out of somebody, but that's really not the case. And I don't know, I feel like I've always just tried to talk to players like we're talking here. And it's a people business. It's a human business, and you just want to have conversations. You just want to treat people like human beings. And I think guys appreciate that. I think they're going through day to day, and there's a high stress job. Every game, their job is on the line. In Zay Jones's case, one drop, one mistake, and your ass is traded. And I think that they kind of appreciate just taking a deep breath and talking about life. And I got a bunch of notebooks here, from previous stories, previous interviews. I always try to do a shit ton of research as much as I possibly can. Learn everything you can about that player before you go in. And you're going to run across articles, hell, back to their college newspaper, every stop they've been at. In his case, with his dad, what he went through. And I just try to learn as much as I possibly can. And then, yeah, definitely write down a lot of notes and thoughts and have a general idea of where you think that conversation could go. Like, we'll start here and we'll kind of, I think people like talking chronologically. It's easier to retrace their steps through life. But at the same time, like, even though I've got a lot of stuff written down, I've got a lot of stuff written down more so to just put it into my brain. Because I don't want to look down at my notebook when I'm talking to somebody. Like, I don't want to. I think you lose something. It's a minor thing that answers your question, but I think if you're constantly look up, down, up, like that, you're losing an intimacy. Like, think about if you're like on a date with somebody and you're on your phone the whole time, or she's on her phone the whole time. It's like, I went on those days before I met Gina, and it's like, all right, done, over. I'm checked out. You might as well pull out the pack of cigarettes. Like, this is over. I think it's almost as similar when you're talking to a player. It's kind of like how engaged is he going to be if you're too consumed with, okay, I just asked this question, now I got to ask this. Like, let it flow. Just have a conversation.
And it also probably, like, if you're looking down and looking and taking a ton of notes too, it probably reminds them that they're talking to a reporter, and not that you're tricking them, but it takes you out of that flow. Like, all of a sudden, then, somebody who's been doing interviews, like a pro athlete or a high level college athlete, they have like interview mode that they go into, right? We've all dealt with that. And so I think then when you're talking, you get better stuff, because then it's not, they don't remind, oh wait, I'm talking to a reporter, I can't say this one thing. But when they're just talking, and I think you're trying to trip them up, but to get that honest moment, or get that unguarded reflection on that. So you mentioned that the research you do when you do these stories. How much other reporting are you doing in terms of interviewing, and how do you kind of balance, like, this is Zay Jones's story, and so you get it in his words, with bringing in other voices and other material to kind of like fact check it, to supplement it?
Yeah, and that's definitely something I know I can do better. We probably all can do better, because really the reporting, it could always feel like it's never finished. Like, there's always somebody else that you can call, another perspective that you can get. I think like this David Long Jr. story I did,
Which is great,
at Go Long in July. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Miami Dolphins linebacker. We chatted for, I don't know, 2.5, 3 hours. That was a long one, but I that did feel almost like a heart to heart therapeutical session, because I mean, everything he has been through is jarring. Similar to Marcel Darius in a way here in Buffalo, where it's like everybody in his life is just dying, not nonstop. The people he loved, and then he has a brother who is taken away to prison, and he's behind bars way longer than he should have been given the crime. But his dad was a kingpin in Dayton, Ohio, and it's like they were punishing the son for the sins of the father. And he gets out of prison, and then he meets some girls at a gas station, gets dinner at Applebee's. They lure him back to an apartment down in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and he is executed. I mean, David Long went through everything he has been through was unbelievable. And so, we have this conversation and I transcribe every word and I print it out and highlighting and thinking and kind of parsing through it. And in that case, I'm really glad that I did like have some more conversations. And it takes two to take. Like it takes David Long bearing his soul, and it takes his mother, right, whose son was executed, and it's unbelievable what she has been through. And this is stuff that she didn't want to talk about for a long time, up until really this year when she's getting some justice for all of that. She filled in so many gaps. Like she cleared up so many things that, I mean, David Long is whatever 7 years old when the SWAT team is breaking into his house and all this stuff starts to happen. So her memory was a little sharper. I think it is so important to, within reason and within the time constraints, deadlines that you kind of have at your disposal, to talk to as many people as you possibly can. And I called David Long back 3 more times. We talked on the phone after sitting down that long just to clarify things, get more detail, while also making it a conversation, right? And getting more perspective and context for how all of these deaths kind of created this beast within him. And that's great on a football field. The guy's a badass. You pull up his YouTube highlights. I mean, he just was obliterating people at West Virginia, Tennessee, and Miami now in the pros. But it came at a cost. Like he has not been able to turn it off up until really last year. So I think it does help to talk to as many people as you can. And to backtrack, yeah, into that one, I was researching as much as I can and reading as many articles as I can. Yeah, a guy gets to the NFL, he's done a lot of these interviews. There's always a way to kind of take it deeper and then try to get somebody to open up just a little bit more than maybe they did in the past.
I was curious, and we may have talked about this on a previous podcast, because you've done so many of these stories about just crushing stories that these players come from, and these players, their family stories and their family histories, or even just the bonkers interview. Like we could do a whole series on Sammy Watkins. How do you kind of you hear this stuff, you hear these stories, you write it down, you do all the research. How do you kind of protect your own mental health, hearing these types of stories and like dealing with all of this stuff and living it yourself and reliving it as you research it and write it and report it and edit it and all of that? Like how do you kind of not get buried by the heaviness of all of these stories?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question, Brian. Because like I said, even though I'm kind of gravitated toward that humanizing player profile, I'd like to hope I'm not the homicide detective, right? Showing up on the I-90 and, seeing decapitated heads off of, bodies on motorcycles and all of that stuff, which a relative did show me that a couple of years ago. And I was like, whoa. And he was like, yeah, we see this stuff all the time. Like you hope you never kind of get to that place where it's like, yeah, this is awful, but I've seen it and heard it. And because I think if you write anything, you better be passionate about it. Like you better have that oomph behind it, because readers can tell when they're reading a story if you're just kind of punching in, punching out, telling a story to get it done, or if did you really pour yourself into this thing. So I think it is important to pour your heart and soul into a profile, a feature. If you're going to do a good job telling, and trust me, I've done the punch in, punch out, and it's natural with this, especially in sports media today, with how much you got to crank out. But thankfully, we go along. I can write what I want to write and do the stories I want to do. I don't know, man. Like I think probably it can be heavy, but more than that, I always come away from these thinking I want to be a better person, because usually it doesn't end with the players saying, yeah, and life still sucks. Like, yeah, I'm still depressed and angry. And I mean, in a lot of cases, it is going to be open-ended to some degree. Like even with David Long, like he's happier in Miami. He met somebody who he might marry one day. Like he thinks he's turned this corner, but we'll see. But I think for the most part, you talk to all of these guys who have been through so much and found their own way to get through the mess. Like even a Sammy Watkins, who was depressed and drinking and partying and down and out, and his family's tied up in a RICO case and all of that. Like he gets to that place his own unique way, right? Falling down all those rabbit holes on astral realms and etheric bodies and different dimensions and demons and all like. But he got out. He got to a happier place, and you kind of come out of these conversations thinking like, man, like life is too short. Like life is too damn short. Like I'm gonna go home and hug my wife, hug the kids, love life, like and try to genuinely appreciate every day because I haven't been through anything remotely close to what a lot of these players have been through. So I think it does. So I mean, it's right. It's a selfish answer, but I think when you talk to all these guys, it does kind of help you as a writer and an interviewer appreciate life in a way. And um, yeah, I mean, Jerry Sullivan, the Buffalo News columnist, I'll never forget when I was an intern way back in the day in college, he said something like, I love this job because it's a free education. And it's so true. Like, you're always going to learn something. You're always going to meet somebody's story. And if you're a curious person, I can't imagine doing anything else.
Let's end this as I always end this, and you should know this is coming because I've asked you every time. What's the best thing you've read lately?
Oh, I should know this is coming. Okay, let me think about this. Well, here's the latest book I just read, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Just from he is amazing. I love Simon Sinek. If I ever want to be inspired, I try to reread like a chapter from Start With Why, or this book just came out a couple years ago. Man, he is just such an optimistic, positive person, understands business today. It's like a business book, but it's not. It's like a life help book. So in terms of books, I'd go with that. This is going to be kind of random, but I think there was a story I just read a couple days ago in County Highway, which bills itself as America's only newspaper. Did you hear about this project? It's great.
No.
The writing is amazing. It's just like old school, long form journalism. It's not sports. It's just kind of like the human condition. And there's essays and some investigative stuff, but it's just incredibly reported, incredibly written. The brainchild of Walter Kern, who's got a Substack as well with Matt Taibbi. That's how I heard about it. But he wrote a story about his cabin in the woods that he inherited from his dad, and it's wild. Like just this cabin that I don't want to give too much away. It's like mystical, and his dad came back in the form of a bear, and he interacted with his late father, and it was cool. Like he's just an incredible writer, incredible thinker. So something a little different. And if you want to support like a newspaper in today's digital age, County Highway is really cool. I got a lot to catch up on there.
All right, we'll have links to all of that in show notes, as well as links to all of Ty's stuff. And if you're not subscribing to Go Long, what are you doing here? We've been on this train since day one, and you're not gonna get better NFL coverage anywhere else. So Ty, as always, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Brian, it is so good to talk with you, man. Thanks so much for having me. Any day, anytime.
Thanks for listening to The Other 51. Special thanks to Tyler Dunne for taking the time to be on the show this week. You can find all of Tyler's stuff and all of the things we talked about at golongtd.com, and really subscribe to his Substack already. Jen Moritz does our graphics. Ellie Moritz did our music. I'm Brian, and I'll talk to you next time.